Bueno, Luis, buenos días. Hoy tocan 4 temas, que son 4 temas de gramática. Los vamos a ver todos juntos. Realmente, bueno, son temas cortitos. Yo creo que por eso los he puesto hoy así todos juntos. ¿Vale? Yo creo que nos dará tiempo a verlos. Incluso, no sé si nos quedaremos un poco cortos, pero bueno, no pasa nada si nos quedamos cortos, no hay problema. ¿Vale? Son los temas que tienen que ver con la expresión de la cantidad, el grupo preposicional, un poco todo esto. Entonces, bueno, pues vamos a esperar 5 minutos y empezamos la clase. Voy abriendo los apuntes. Vale. Un momento. ...16, 17 y 18, ¿vale? Entonces, pues nada, vamos a esperar ahora un ratito, 5 minutos y empezamos la clase. Vale. Bueno, pues vamos a empezar entonces, si queréis, con el primer tema, que sería el tema 15, ¿vale? A ver, voy a empezar aquí a ponerle. Estos temas que vamos a ver más o menos tienen que ver con la parte de la sintaxis, ¿de acuerdo? Entonces, les podemos tratar de diferentes maneras. Yo creo que, vamos, se pueden tratar, la manera más fácil, yo creo que es simplemente pues analizando las diferentes expresiones de tiempo. Podríamos analizar a través de los sintagmas. Lo que pasa es que los sintagmas, al ser muy variados y sobre todo tener el sintagma preposicional luego en otro de los temas, a lo mejor no es tan interesante tratarlo desde un punto de vista sintagmático. Es más interesante tratarlo pues un poco desde lo que supone las palabras. Cuando hablamos en sintaxis, hay que diferenciar 2 niveles, que sería por un lado tenemos el nivel de las palabras y por otro lado tenemos el nivel de las funciones. Perdón, tenemos el nivel de los sintagmas y por otro lado tenemos el nivel de las funciones dentro de la frase. Entonces, if you want to start with the introduction, what I suggest is you can do a difference between what is what is a phrase and what is the function within the phrase, or what is the function associated with the phrase. Usually a phrase, in syntagma, is a combination of different words. Usually, it has it depends on the type of phrase, and it depends because the nucleus or the core of the phrase depends on the category of the word. For example, if we've got a noun, the phrase that we're going to build up or make is a noun phrase. Whereas if the phrase starts with a preposition, then we would have or we would build a prepositional phrase. The same happens with the adverbs and the adjectives. Usually, adverbs and adjectives do not have any pre-modifier or post-modifier within the phrase. Something that it does has the noun phrase and even the verbal group. When we analyze the verbal group, we just remember that it had the primary auxiliary, the operator, and then the lexical verb, and that we could build up a whole verbal phrase, like for example, must have been working. Must have been working would have an operator, which is the must, and a primary auxiliary, which would be have, then a secondary auxiliary, which is the been, and finally we've got the lexical verb, which would be working or making or reading or whatever verb we use. The same happens with when we talk about the preposition, the noun phrases. The noun phrases usually have a determiner, which is usually the or a one, if we're speaking in singular, or if we use the plural, we may encounter with the some or some quantifiers. Then these would act as determiners, and after the determiner, we usually may find a pre-modifier which takes the form of an adjective which describes or complements or gives an extra information about the noun. And then we have the post-modifier, which also usually is a prepositional phrase adding more information about the noun in the form of, for example, the pretty house of Mark. The pretty house of Mark, we have here a noun phrase where we've got the determiner the pretty would be a pre-modifier, house would be our nucleus or core of the noun phrase, and of Mark would be a prepositional phrase that acts as a post-modifier, as a complement, or gives extra information about the noun. Now, I'm telling you all of these things because it's important to discuss what is the construction of the noun of the phrases in comparison with the functions. This duality or this difference between what is a phrase and what is the function of the phrase, it's important because then it would allow us to understand which phrase is giving us a manner or which one is giving us a mean or an instrument. Now, usually, so we have the noun phrase, we've got the verb phrase, we've got the adjective phrase and the adverb phrase. Now, these phrases, they all have within them functions, and they have associated with them functions within the syntax. So when we analyze a sentence, we want to know what phrase does what, or what information each phrase is giving us. So usually, in order to understand that information, we ask ourselves certain questions such as what, answering to the question of what is the direct object, who would be the subject, where the complement of place, when the complement of time, how the complement of manner. Now, all of these, it's allow them to understand and to order the sentence and what we want to say. Remember that in English, the word order is very fixed, and we cannot alter or modify this word order. We only modify it in order just because we want to include or we want to emphasize an information, and this is called a fronting. We would add information at the beginning, so we would place a complement of manner, place, or time at the beginning because we want to emphasize that information rather than the rest of the sentence. Right. So more or less that would be our introduction, making the difference between what is a noun, what is phrases, and what is the functions associated with the phrases. Also, we need to describe the how and the what of an action. Now, the verb usually only describes an action, only give us an action. and the complements that we use within the sentence allowed us to include more information or to complete the information that we want to share with the other people. So the manner or the adverbs of manner give us or are intended to give us more information about how the way we perform the action, and also the instrument that we use in the action. Usually for these we have adverbs such as quickly or fast or slow, which are adverbs that gives more information about how the action is performed or how the action is perceived. And then to complement this action, we use instruments. So in order to implement these actions. So for example, I kick the ball with my boots. And now I kick the ball strongly with my boots. That would be the manner, and then the instruments. So and then we have that we need to respect these order in English, that it goes always with the subject and the verb, which are compulsory within a sentence, and then we would add more information which is not compulsory and is not necessary to include. We include it in order to give more information, but really the sentence would only be would be completed just by using the subject and the verb. Something that, compared to Spanish, usually in Spanish we would allow to omit the subject in certain sentences. In English, this does not happen. We only can omit the subject when we use the non-conjugated forms of the verb. That is the participle, the infinitive, or the gerund. So, what about the adverbs of manner in grammar? Well, first of all, these words are flexible in the word order. So, although they have a determined position and already an established position within the sentence, we can front them, or we can place them at the beginning or at the end, just to give another, or just to give an emphasis, or to vindicate, or yes, to give an emphasis within the sentence. For example, if we take these two examples we've got here, he answered the question foolishly describes how he answered it. So foolishly refers more to the verb of how he answers. So that would mean that the answer to the question is basically a nonsense answer. So the people would say, well, what kind of answer did you give? That's nonsense. Whereas if we place foolishly at the beginning, then the meaning of the sentence would be different. Foolishly, he answered the question. That is, foolishly in this sense, he does not mean that his answer has nonsense. Is that probably the person who answered the question was not paying attention, and he all of a sudden decided to answer the question. And so here the foolishly is operating in two different aspects. The first one, placed at the end of the sentence, modifies the verb in the way that he says that your answer was or didn't have any sense. Whereas in the second one, does not refer to the way we answer the question, but to the context and to the situation in which the person who answered the question was. So really, he's not saying, if he's not, he in the second example, foolishly, is not saying anything about the verb. He's saying something about the person. So as you see, both of them are manner, but they operate in a different sense. Then the second point is that may be modified by adverbs of degree. Very, quite, a lot. For example, he very foolishly he answered the question. Very foolishly, like saying, "Oh my God, he was not paying attention at all." And in the third point would be formed by adding "ly" to adjectives. Usually, the adverbs are formed by a process of derivation, where the suffix ly is added to the root, and so they change the category of the word, and that's all. For example, closely, clearly, easily, greedily, or happily. All of them come from adjectives, very simple. Now, there is an exception when we use the comparative and the superlatives of manner, which usually we use more or less, or the most and the least in the case of superlatives. Here, if we compare, or we were to compare two actions, we would use the adverbs. We are comparing two actions, so we need to use the adverbs. So in this case, instead of using the er or the suffixes used to produce the verbs, sorry, to produce the adverbs, we would use just the form, the more or the less for the comparative, and the less and the least for the superlative. The next feature is that you do not place adverbs between the object and the verb. Well, usually this is what is recommended to do. Adverbs fit best at the end of the sentence, because that's their natural place. If we look at the word order that we looked at the beginning, subject, verb, object, manner, place, and time, really the adverbs would go after the verb. Only the frequency adverbs would go before the verb, because they are telling us how frequent you do the action. So they need to go before the verb, so to mark that routine, or to mark those times. Now, adverbs, for example, as we said in the example, the toddler hit the table excitedly. Now, we could move this excitedly at the beginning. So, for example, excitedly the toddler hit the table. In this case, the excitedly it refers to the toddler, how the attitude of the toddler. Whereas if I say the toddler hit excitedly the table, it's not right. It's not wrong. It doesn't sound wrong, but really, it's not placed correctly, because we need to, after the verb, we need the direct object. What did he hit the table? How did he hit it? Excitedly. We only place the adverbs before the verb because we want to give the emphasis, or because we want to give this frequency idea that is associated with the verbs. For example, the doctor gently woke the sleeping patient. Now, gently here functions as an emphasizing of how the doctor just woke up the patient. We could say the doctor woke the sleeping patient gently. We would not give it very much importance to how we have done the action. If we place it gently at the end. Now, third, we could use the adverb at the beginning of a sentence because we want to catch someone's attention. So by, for example, foolishly he answered the question. Here, as we said before, foolishly has two ways of interpreting. Really, in this case, if we say foolishly, we would be saying that he was not paying attention, and he said whatever he come to his mind. And so we're placing two things. We're saying two things about the person who answered. First, that he was not paying attention, and second, that his answer was a nonsense. Whereas if we place the foolishly at the end, we would not be paying much attention to the attitude, but rather to the answer itself. The fourth and the last of these features of the adverbs of manner is that there is a preposition before the object, and the adverb may be placed before the preposition. For example, he agreed quickly to go to the store. Where is the preposition? To go to the store. Here we've got a prepositional phrase that is to go to the store. In this case, this preposition also functions as a conjunction, as a subordinate clause. That he agreed something. Here, the subordinate clause is functioning as a direct object. He agreed on something. What is it he did agree? To go to the store, right? So, ways to express manner of doing things. Well, we can use these suffixes, these ending of like li or wise or like or fashion, style. Usually the most used are wise or like, these are the two ways, the two most common ways of expressing a manner. We use these two endings with the roots. So likewise, or for example, clockwise would be a manner of doing it. And so just intending in the subject, the suffix wise would be in the manner of. Now, other ways of expressing manner would be with prepositional phrases, which it's very interesting to know to understand what they really want to express within the sentence, with, in, or in the way, or in the manner, or in the style. These all are ways of expressing these prepositional phrases, and also ways of expressing manner. And finally, we could also use the expressions such as just as, or as if, or like, or as, which are three ways of expressing again these manners. Comparing here, we are actually comparing or making a simile with another action, or with something that is near us, and so to make our audience understand what we want to really say or express. Right. What about the formation of the adverbs? This is important because when we express manner, we need to talk about how can we build up an adverb. So basically, there are different ways of making adverbs from adjectives and adding, as what we saw before, the suffixes. For example, the adjective plus l and y, beautifully, or the adjective ending in happy, in y, because before the y precedes a consonant, then this y, which is a semi-vowel, would have to change into an I and add the suffix ly. Then the same happens with different process happens with the word structure when the y is preceded by a vowel. In this case, the y would function as a semi-consonant, and there would not be any necessity of changing the y into an I. The same things happens with the extreme, or with the some adjectives ending in a silent e, because this silent e is not in silent e, the e, because it's not pronounced, it is intended to stay or remain. So in order to add or just in order to make this difference in the syllable pattern. So extremely would be extremely. So the other ways would be extremely. So very difficult to separate into syllables. Now, also remember that when it ends, when the final syllable ends following the structure of consonant, vowel, consonant, then because of this necessity of these patterns of making syllables, we would add a second consonant at the end and placing the li, for example, in the case of finally, or simply in this case, because the ending is an L plus an E, we would only add the Y, or sensibly. Now, all of these seems to be un poco, entre comillas, chorrada, as to describe in a theme of opposition. But basically is your action, is the way you have to explain it, is something that you see daily in your classes with your students, and so it's just another performing or showing your jury that you have these linguistic knowledge about the adverb and the adverb formation. Sometimes you say, well, this is something of a kind of a bit of stupid, but it is what you have to do. In fact, you are presenting yourself as to become teachers of English. So this is what you have to do, of course. Now, expressions of means and instruments. Means and instruments are usually performed by prepositional phrases, and they answer the question of how. Usually, these prepositional phrases are introduced or given by prepositions such as by, with, use, without, or any other prepositions that may imply a use of an instrument or a use of a mean. For example, by introducing the means for in the sentence like my children go to school by bus. Usually, by is usually associated with the means of transport. Remember what the students are taught in primary stages with the prepositions by car, by plane, by train. But then there's this exception on foot, because it does not. It doesn't mean that you're being carried by this automobile thing, but really you're carried on your foot. So you're standing on your foot. So it has got sense that it's not by your foot. Your foot does not walk you. You are standing on them, and you make them walk with you along your body. So that's why you would use a on foot. Now, with also means an instrument, and usually it's associated with the tools that are being used. In this case, we see with our eyes. We see with our eyes, with imply an instrument. Also, the verb use also inserts or includes means or instruments of using things. For example, he used a rare tool to repair my car. Now, use a rare tool. A rare tool would be the instrument, and we have used this use not to be confused with also the expression used to, which implies a certain routine in the past. Finally, the use of without is also allowed to express the absence of any tool or anything being used. For example, I did it without help. Now, also, if we add the suffix ly at the end of the phrases, for example, beautifully, he played beautifully. In this case, beautifully is saying how, or he played the clarinet beautifully. In this case, we're saying, we're expressing here the instrument, or the mean was the clarinet, which is in this case a direct object. But these other phrases expresses how has it been done. So beautifully. Could it be expressed more in adverbs of manner? Yes, probably yes, rather than in means of or an instrument. But as it's near the verb in this case, whereas although here the clarinet is a direct object and is associated with play, this beautifully is modifying the verb play. So we could add maybe it's not even a manner, a complement of manner. We could say there is probably a predicative complement, that is something or is giving information about both the instrument, so that there are direct object, and the subject. Well, finally, we would arrive to our conclusion. The expression of manner, means, and instrument allow us to enrich our expression of things. Usually, when we use these kind of extra information into the sentence, we allow our audience to better understand what we want to say, or to understand or to give more information about things that happened. And so, really, the understanding of these adverb phrases really depend on the context. Now, adverb phrases are very important to be worked with the students, because they are very simple to be added into a sentence. But we need to make sure that our students work with these means and manners correctly. Usually, for them, it's kind of complicated to make, above all in the first stages of first and secondary of education, to make sentences, simple sentences with varying or with a great variety of nouns, or sorry, of adverb phrases. But at least it would be interesting to include just one or two adverbs, so to increase the information that we give in the sentences that they write. Okay, this is the webgraphy. Any questions? Ok, good. Bueno, pues este es un tema simple, sencillito, que, bueno, viene bien para... Yo no le defendería, sinceramente, le defendería si no tengo otra opción. Que son temas de estos que, bueno, pues puedes para salir del atolladero si no te sabes los otros, pues vienen bien. No son grandes temas, no son temas en los que uno se pueda lucir, pero bueno, si se controlan bien y más o menos se hace un análisis un poco así como filológico, pues puede ser una buena idea, ¿vale? Bueno, pues entonces hemos visto al 15, pasamos ahora al 16. Vale. Bueno, pues entonces vamos a compartir el 16. Vale. La expresión de la posesión. Bueno, aquí, ¿qué es lo que vamos a estar viendo? Pues aquí va a ser prácticamente un monográfico de cómo usar, por un lado, el genitivo sajón y la preposición, y bueno, el complemento preposicional que implica pues la posesión, ¿no? Sobre todo, bueno, pues sí que es verdad que también vamos a hablar de los adjetivos, de los determinantes en su grado adjetivo posesivo, ¿no? En español sería mi, tú, su. Todo esto son nuestros adjetivos posesivos, que son los determinantes. Cuando hablamos en lengua castellana, sabéis que hay que hacer la diferencia entre el artículo determinado o indeterminado y luego cuando hablamos de los adjetivos, y luego dentro de los determinantes tenemos los adjetivos que son los determinantes, que son ese, este, aquel, luego los posesivos, que sería mi, tu, su, etcétera, nuestro, vuestro, y luego tendríamos también los numerales, en los que tenemos, bueno, pues las de números, que tenemos los numerales, los cardinales, los partitivos, etcétera, los interrogativos y los exclamativos. Realmente todo eso sería dentro de los determinantes, incluso los indefinidos, adjetivos indefinidos, algunas, todo eso son adjetivos indefinidos que se utilizan como determinantes dentro del noun phrase, ¿no? Bueno, pues esto es interesante tenerlo en cuenta a la hora de la expresión de la posesión, porque la posesión en inglés, la mayor parte de las veces, se hace con el genitivo sajón, no con la forma latina de los pronombres, perdón, no de los pronombres, sino de los adjetivos posesivos o de los pronombres que sustituyen a la combinación del adjetivo posesivo y el nombre, ¿vale? Por ejemplo, mi casa, mía, mía es nuestro pronombre, mi es nuestro determinante, adjetivo posesivo, y casa sería el núcleo del complemento del sintagma nominal, ¿vale? Bueno, esto es esta introducción, más o menos así un poco a grosso modo, pues es algo que también sería interesante a lo mejor incluir como una especie de comparación con el área de lingüística, de lengua, porque realmente lo que nos encontramos en primero de la ESO es precisamente este trabajo filológico que hace de lengua castellana y que también se hace desde lengua inglesa. So, usually, when we have these, I believe it would be interesting for you as future teachers to suggest the idea that it's interesting to certainly do a comparison of how these noun phrases are built in Spanish and in English, because in Spanish there's no anything similar to the Saxon genitive. The Saxon genitive is something very characteristic and very very particular of England. In Spain, how we express possession, it's very simple. We use the possessive adjective, and then or we use a prepositional phrase within which bears within in it a possessive adjective. So usually I think you could propose is to when the Spanish teacher is giving or is explaining the possessive or the formation of the possessive, or even he's explaining the syntax, it could be a good moment to also combine those sessions in Spanish, where it focuses on the construction of the the phrases, or the noun phrases, and the functions within the sentence, to include the way, or to include certain of aspects of English, which has to do with how to express possession. So, first of all, our theme is going to be, we're going to deal with how do we express possession through words, then the possession through the genitive case, what is this action genitive, and the possession of. Now, this is the three ways that we can express possession in English, and of course, we will have to deal with the problems of Spanish learners with this, because Spanish learners, they have a great difficulty with the action genitive. They understand it, but they do not apply it. So, what about how do we express possession through possessive words? Now, first of all, in a sentence, when we make a sentence and we analyze the functions of a sentence, we usually ask ourselves different questions. Now, what, where, when, and how. Now, all of those questions refer to something or express something in the sentence. In our case, those questions express possession. Whose or whom. Now, to ask about someone belonging about a person, we will use these two questions: whom or whose. Whose office is this, or who does this office belong to, or to whom was this letter addressed? Now, or whom was this letter addressed to? Now, these are the three ways we can express possession, and the three ways we ask about the possession of how the person possess something. Now, with the pronoun, with the double-H question, whose office is this? We're asking, it would be in Spanish, we would mean the quién. Whose office is this? And so we are already implying a certain possession with the whose. Whereas if we ask of whom is more about we want to understand, or we want to identify the person, and so we need to include the to, the preposition to. So in order to direct to the person, or to point at the person which has forgot or is working in an office. And whom would be the most unused way of using, probably the most formal and the most and less common way of expressing a possession. Whom was this letter addressed to? Now, also in English, we also so in order to answer to these double-H questions, we use certain or specific words such as my, your, his, her, our, your, and their. These are all adjectives. These are all, or they all work as determinants. They determine the or give an extra information about the kind of word. My car is very old. My car is a noun phrase where my functions as an adjective, as a possessive adjective regarding the word car. Or my mother is a teacher. Again, my, it refers to mother in the case, in the sense that it marks a possession. Now, these combination of these adjective, these possessive adjectives with a noun, with a noun, or they can be substituted by pronouns. Remember, the difference between an adjective and a pronoun. A pronoun is, as its structure says, is pronoun. That is, it takes the form of a noun. It substitutes the noun. In this case, it substitutes not only the noun but the noun phrase, the entire noun phrase. So in this case, my mother would be mine. Mine. Or my car is very old. That would also be mine. Or your car is very old. Yours is very old. So when we use the pronouns, we cannot use the pronouns straight away. We need first we need a context in order to make the people understand what are we talking about. Because if not, then the use of pronouns cannot be linked to the previous sentences, and so we may have this problem of misunderstanding, that nobody understands what are you talking about because there's no an immediate context where you can make the reference to. Now, so we have these possessive pronouns, of course, do not have an apostrophe. The apostrophe is only used for nouns. So the Saxon genitive is only going to be used for nouns. And also, we can express possession through words such as have or got or belong to or hold or own. These words express also a possession. Have is the same. Have in Spanish would be tener, or got. It means also tener, or have got, which is a combination, means the same thing. Own refers more to not only it means to have something, but to have acquire or to be in to have, yes, to have acquire something that nobody can take from you, because you it's your property, it belongs to you. Belong to also seems to point to the direction of who is the tenant, or who's the person who to who it belongs something, so to that possesses or owns something. And owns, this has a nuance of it owns to me. That means that I'm the holder of this thing. I'm holding. For example, when we talk about a holding as a group of enterprises means that it's a bunch of enterprises that are owned by a superior company, but really they're not owning the companies. They're just grouping the companies and financing them, but not really that haven't owned. There is no a person who owns the whole or the entire holding. For example, my father has got a Mini Cooper. I hope so. That's my wish, but it doesn't. All right. What about the possession with the Saxon genitive? Now, and this is the core of the theme of today's theme. Now, what is the Saxon genitive? Now, the Saxon genitive is expressed by an apostrophe and an S, and this apostrophe and an S is usually is linked to a noun phrase or a noun, and it expresses or wants to express that something belongs to someone. For example, is that Olivia's bag? Here, the question could be also made or asked in another way. For example, is that the bag of Olivia? Now, is that the bag of Olivia? That is entirely correct. There's no faults in it. There's no mistakes. But really, it's not. It doesn't sound English. Now, and this is something very interesting because usually in Spain, and the whole Europe, the way of making or observing that someone is not British or is not English is because the way they use the Saxon genitive. English, the way they speak, usually they tend to use as less words as possible and to express the more and express the more. And this is something it's called the Grising Maxims. We saw it in one of the themes to be relevant and to use less words but much information, so that to be quick in the way we speak. And so this is something very particular of England. Of the English language, the use of the Saxon genitive, because we are reducing the use of a word, and also we are reducing the number of syllables within a sentence. So it's more quick. It's quicker and allow us to express more things in less time. So, for example, the Saxon genitive could also be used in complex noun phrases. When we say complex noun phrases, for example, is Carmen's father. Carmen's father, we could say father of Carmen. But in the father of Carmen, we want to add the Saxon genitive at the end of father. So here we have a double Saxon genitive. The father's retirement party refers to so they're like two noun phrases. The first one is retirement party of a father, and then Carmen has a father who's making a retirement party. So in order to express this complex sentence, we went to the father um, uh, the father of Carmen's retirement party. Sorry, no, we went to, let's say, we went to the retirement party of the father of Carmen. That would be in Spanish. We went to the retirement party of the father of Carmen. So kind of a very long sentence. Whereas this could be summarized, or we could get rid of all these syllables by using this action genitive. We went to Carmen's father's retirement party. So here we're getting rid of the of, and it's more easy to say, and it's more direct and even more quick. So that's what we're looking for with this action genitive. We could also use this action genitive with particles of time. So making something as or making a thing that belongs to a time. For example, is that yesterday's magazine? Is that the magazine belongs to yesterday? That the magazine was, or the newspaper was published yesterday. So in a way, metaphorically, that newspaper belongs to the time of yesterday. So that's why we're using this action genitive, to associate the newspaper or the magazine to the previous day. Now, what about the rules that we have when we form this action genitive? First of all, the use of this action genitive after a singular noun, or we use the apostrophe ns after a singular noun, and we use the only apostrophe after plural nouns. Why? Because it has to do with pronunciation. If we were to express, for example, fishes or or houses, if we were to add the apostrophe plus the s, we would have to lengthen the sound of the s at least for 1 or 2 seconds. For example, houses. So the final s would have to be very long. Something is kind of a waste of time, and because we already know by context that is already the plural. So that's why you just add the apostrophe just to mark that there is a section genitive, but is in the plural. We use the s with our regular pronouns too. For example, with the children or men or people or women. Women's rights, the right of women. Now, women is in plural, but we use the rights of the women's. Now, in here, that would be in Spanish. In English, would be women's apostrophe s rights, right? Now, also with the compound words or compound nouns, the apostrophe s is added at the end of the second root. For example, my sister-in-law's friend is coming. Now, this is again a question of having sense. If we add sister, if we add the apostrophe s after sister, then we are modifying the sense of my sister-in-law completely. My sister-in-law's apostrophe s friend is coming. So here we are referring to my sister-in-law, not my sister, right? And finally, we don't use apostrophe is, we use things. For example, the door handle, not the door's handle. That is something, the door handle here, the door is function or is acting as an adjective. It's not possessing something. It's not that the door possessed the handle. It hasn't got a sense. It's just that it is classifying or identifying that handle belongs to the door. Now, what about the pronunciation of this action genitive? And this is important. So the pronunciation is the same as if we were to pronounce the plurals. We use this final s at the end of the sound, and usually with voiceless consonants such as the t, ka, are pronounced with a voiceless. For example, paths or clerks. Now, the voice consonants, the b, d, g, are pronounced with the voiceless z. For example, megs or teds. Now, if it finishes with an s at the end, for example, roses or batches or midges or rushes,
or garages. All right, so we add these these I, sorry, no, the in phonetics would be E sound, this E sound before the sibilant and the voiceless, okay? E sound, E sound. That's the front close, um, short sound E, right? If you want to be a bit be linguistic, you would have to say the front, the front closed short E sound, okay, before the voiceless S, okay. Right. What about the Saxon genitive in spoken English? So first of all, we have the local genitive. The local genitive is used to talk about places which are familiar. For example, in Spain, it's particularly when you go to the towns and to rural towns. To say voy a la Tomasa a tomarme unos huevos fritos. A la Tomasa, the sound of la Tomasa means a place. Well, that noun phrase of la Tomasa in English, we would use the apostrophe s as saying that that place is owned by that person. For example, we decided to go to John's after the cinema. John's is the house of John. And so we decided to go to the place of John, the place that John owns, so to go after the cinema. Second, we've got the post genitive, and it's usually is used in short answers, not necessarily can be omitted. But for example, is that your car? No, it's Sandra's. Now, in Sandra's is Sandra's car, but because we have asked and because we're responding to an immediate question, we can omit the word car because we can recuperate that information from the immediate context. For example, anyone, anybody, someone, and somebody also use the apostrophe s. Is that someone's hat? When we don't know who's the tenant of something or the owner of something, then we would use these indefinite words so to mark or so to ask about. Hey, anybody knows who belongs to who belongs this thing or this stuff? Else it could also be used with apostrophe s. So, for example, why didn't you come? Everyone else's mom was there. Now, here is the same thing as what we explained before. Everyone else's mom refers to everyone else is entire pronoun, and we are the apostrophe to mark all the mothers of all the people in the school were there. And finally, we have other ways of using the apostrophe s. For example, with the singular form, we have the apostrophe s. For example, they took each other's hand and started walking. They took each other's hand, reciprocal. So they hold both hands and they walked. And then we have the plural forms that they form the apostrophe after the plural. For example, all of our luggage arrived, but the others, in this case, other luggages didn't come. So here we put the apostrophe and we don't put the s because it's in the plural. Now, what about the possessive with of? Now, possessive with of is another way of making or suggesting that you own something. It's less common in English because the most common is the genitive Saxon, but it is also right to use the prepositional phrase of to mark or to include this possession. For example, noun phrase plus of plus the possessive pronoun. Now, a friend of mine told me that you have bought a vintage car. A friend of mine. And here, the use of this Saxon genitive would be a bit complicated. Because we are combining a pronoun with the prepositional phrase of. So kind of difficult to mark a genitive section would be a redundancy, and there's no way of making a section genitive that makes sense. Another one would be a noun phrase plus of plus a possessive noun phrase. For example, a friend of my brother's has opened an academy. Now here we use the section genitive, but to refer to someone else that is different, or someone different than the one who is possessing something. So the mine here is the my in my brothers here. My is not functioning as a pronoun, but rather as an adjective, as a possessive adjective. So it's different from the first sentence. Here, it has got a sense to use the section genitive because there's no pronouns at all. You're using a noun phrase. The of cannot be used or must not be used first with the things that belong to oneself, because that's why we use the section genitive. Of features of relationship between people or animals or countries or categories or groups or organizations. For example, the women's changing room is on the right. The changing room of the women. Now you could say this and people would understand you, but really the section genitive is appeared or exists to fulfill this function. So in that way, if we look at the language economy rule, then we already have a component or a particle that already makes these function. So it would not have sense to have two different particles making the same function. So in the case of English, the section genitive is the one who has priority over the preposition of. For example, her baby's haircut. Her baby's hair was awfully cut. Awfully cut. Very English. Very English sentence, by the way. Here we have first the section genitive, and then awfully cut. Awfully referring to the adverb here. Awfully referring to the verb to be as an attributive adjective. Very interesting how it's been used. Now, what about the problems that we have as Spanish speakers? Well, first of all, the local genitives. We don't usually use the local genitive. We don't understand this local genitive that a place belongs to someone. Harrods at Harrod, when we say Harrods with an S, we think that Harrods, the final S is plural, but it's not. Harrods is apostrophe S because it's the house of Harrod. And that is something that we don't understand, and we commit most of the times it's committed by the students. They commit this problem because they don't understand. Then we don't use the plural, the apostrophe S with the plural nouns. We tend to omit these section genitive. Then we have the possessive determinants that has no apostrophe. The apostrophe S does not mark the plural. Something that sometimes the learners think that it's in plural. Or also we don't use the apostrophe S with possessive pronouns. And sometimes the students the possessive pronouns, they put an apostrophe with an S, and this is a redundancy again because the pronouns, they substitute the noun phrase of already the noun phrase which belong or which bears this adjective, this possessive adjective plus the noun. So again, it hasn't a sense, or it has no sense. So we arrive to the conclusion of what is section genitive. Section genitive is a distinctive feature of the English language. It's a simple aspect, but a very complex aspect to be applied by foreign speakers, especially Spanish and Latin speakers, because they have a different way of expressing possession. Usually, when we express these as action genitive, the students are or feel more secure expressing the possession by making these long noun phrases with the of and the prepositional phrases by referring to the previous question, the previous nucleus or the core of the noun phrase, whereas trying to use the apostrophe s to reduce the number of letters and so gain gain capacity or gain time in when they speak about something, right? So our function as teacher would be or to try to design activities with the students that imply the use of this action genitive, and that this use of this action genitive would allow them to be or to work with them and so to make it personal or in making internal, saying, okay, I have to use this, and then when I speak without having pain or without paying attention to why I speak, it comes up naturally. Right, and this is the end of today's how do you call it, theme. We've got two more themes left. Any questions so far? ¿No? ¿Me preguntas? Vale. Pues un receso, un momento de 5 minutos que tengo que beber agua, ¿vale? Para continuar y continuamos. Dame 5 minutos, por favor. Bueno, ya estoy aquí, voy a beber un poquito de agua. Continuamos. Vale. Bueno, pues este tema ya lo hemos visto, o sea que el tema 16 fuera. Vamos a pasar ahora al tema 17, ¿vale? Un momento. Vale. Bueno, pues entonces ahora estamos con el tema 17, que es en la localización, cómo expresar el lugar, la dirección y la distancia. Aquí volvemos un poco a jugar de nuevo con los sintagmas preposicionales realmente, porque todos los sintagmas preposicionales, vamos, sí, los sintagmas preposicionales son los que nos van a permitir expresar todas estas, ideas, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, También nos vamos a encontrar también los adverbios que también nos van a ayudar a expresar ciertas cosas en lo que se refiere al place o al place and time. Y también nos vamos a encontrar con sintagmas nominales que también nos van a permitir también expresar estos mismos conceptos. Entonces, volvemos un poco a ver el índice que tenemos ahora, en el que nos vamos a encontrar pues un poco, a diferencia de los demás, vamos a ir, como aquí tienen más miga, vamos a analizarlos primero por el lugar, luego la dirección y luego la distancia. Sorry. So first of all, the English that we're going to be looking at today is first the introduction. We would speak about how can we express a time and place. Sorry, how can we express time, place? Within the place, we have also the direction and distances, and we would also see different ways in English that allow us to express these ideas. So first of all, let's just start with the introduction, with the English grammar in two major classes of words. Now we have these, the open words and the closed words. And why do we use this in this theme, in this particular theme? Because even the others in theme 15, in theme 16, we talked about the possession and how to possess. It was difficult. We basically use very close words as prepositions or the section genitive. But here, the noun phrases allow also to express directions. And so when we talk about noun phrases, we're speaking of using adverbs or adjectives or nouns that would allow us to modify them and to express something different. And we could even mix the endings of certain words with other words, with other noun phrases, with nouns, and to produce different words that also produce another type of word, which has a meaning of direction or place, or direction or place, of course. So what about the open words? With these open words, which allow new creation by the process of suffixation and prefixation, we have the verbs, the nouns, the adjectives. Then we've got the closed words, are more the prepositions, the conjunctions, the articles, the numerals. They do not allow new creation of words. Now, prepositions are basically the ones that are going to help us to produce or to express a place or direction, and so usually prepositions, what do they give us? They give us a notion of a spatial reference. They have multiple functions because they how they are used in the sentence. They may imply one function or another because they give us more information about the sentence. It also points to the place with static verbs. Remember that the verbs can be classified into two ways. The static verbs are that imply an action, and the static verbs that imply more a description are the verbs usually associated with the verb to be, the verb to seem, the verb to look like, which do not imply any action at all. And then we have the dynamic verbs, which imply different actions. And so it's interesting to see how, by combining the prepositional phrases with these two verbs, we imply or we give different information. With the static verbs, usually we looked at the place, whereas the dynamic verb, we look more of a destination. So yes, a sort of destination. So what about the prepositional phrase in the adverbial group? Well, adverbs also allow us to speak about place, for example, and they may work within the preposition as an adverb phrase. We stay in all day. Here, the preposition in is not used as a prepositional phrase in order to include something else in the sentence, but rather in is used as a place, as an adverb of place. And all day does not belong to the prepositional phrase in, but is just another another phrase which implies time. All day refers to the complement of time. Right, what about the prepositional phrase? What is a prepositional phrase? Well, a prepositional phrase is usually made up of a preposition, the object of the preposition, and pre or post modifiers. Now, what is this object of the preposition? Well, the object of the preposition is usually a noun. Is performed by a noun or a noun phrase. The prepositional phrase usually begins with a preposition, which is, for example, from or with a preposition which is followed by a noun phrase or a pronoun. For example, it's a gift from her. From her, her is a pronoun. Again, a pronoun is the word that allows to substitute a combination of an adjective verb, determinate plus a noun. Or he lives in a town called Sheffield. In a town called Sheffield is our prepositional phrase, and this would mark as the place. Now here, if you analyze the prepositional phrase, it starts with the preposition in, and then the determinant a, and the object of the preposition, which is the town. The called Sheffield is a post modifier that refers, or that it gives more information about town. We could basically say he lives in a town without saying more information about it. So called Sheffield depends on town. Now, the noun that succeeds the preposition is called the object of the preposition, and it may accept modifiers, as we've seen in the word in the sentence. He lives in a town called Sheffield. For example, I spoke to the wise headmaster of the school. Here, which is the core of this prepositional phrase? Well, we start with the to, but then the core is headmaster. Headmaster is really the core, and what we have here is a pre-modifier, which is the wise, and a post modifier, which is of the school. We could basically get rid of these pre and post modifiers and just say I spoke to the headmaster, right? What about the functions of the prepositional phrases? Well, these functions, usually prepositional phrases, can take up the functions of adverbs, which modifies the verb and gives more information about the where, the when, the how, or also could be or could function as an adjective phrase, which gives more information about the noun. For example, I would like to sell the pants with the stripes. Now, with the stripes is an adjective that refers to the pants, not to the verb. Now, what about placing the prepositional phrase with commas? Well, the initial, if we place the prepositional phrase at the beginning in initial position, that the prepositional phrase is detached from the sentence, and we kind of imply that we give an emphasis or more information, and we find that information is kind of relevant. In the mornings, comma, I go running. That would imply that almost a routine aspect that you do every morning. I go running. Whereas if you place it in a mid position, I, comma, in the morning, comma, go running, I in the morning go running, in here it would seem that the prepositional phrase interferes, and so it seems that it belongs, or rather it points more to the verb, rather than giving more emphasis about the routine aspect that you want to imply with the first sentence. Now, what about the features of a prepositional phrase? Now, first of all, the features are it complements the information of a sentence, and so as a complement, they are optional. They're not compulsory in a sentence. You can include or not include. We were having dinner yesterday at the street. Here we've got two prepositional phrases, which is at the street. Sorry, we've got only one prepositional phrase. The other is an adverb phrase, which is yesterday. At the street gives information, but it really doesn't. We don't care. We could omit that information. Now we also have the complement of the noun phrase. For example, the shop on the right is mine. Now the shop on the right, it gives more information about the shop. So here on the right is functioning as a complement of the noun, not as a complement of the verb. Another one, for example, the dry clothes are in the kitchen. In the kitchen refers to where they are, so it gives more information about the place. Again, what we see here, this is a static verbs. So in the kitchen is a prepositional phrase functioning as a place. Now, what about the functions of the prepositional place? what do they express? First of all, they express a point. They may express a surface, or they may express a volume. A point, that is a destination in the map. A surface, so where do you place the things, or a volume, and that is where do you place yourself within a 3D plan, or a 3D map. Now, what are the prepositions that the prepositions help to convey usually, or the prepositional phrases usually allow us to convey information, to express more information about a location, about a progressive advance towards a destination. So we want to give that we're going to a place, so we include a destination, and then we sometimes can express both a location and a destination at the same time. Un momento, porque creo que hay un ruido por ahí que está haciendo. Vale, ya está. And we were saying that prepositions help us to convey first a location, and then a progressive advance towards a destination. So, for example, I'm heading to Madrid, or I'm heading towards Madrid. I'm heading to Madrid. To Madrid, first, the verb also expresses certain progression towards a place, and to Madrid expresses an adjunct of place. So here, the idea of progression towards a destination is expressed both by the verb and the prepositional phrase. Towards imply even more progressing towards the destination, to the final destination. Okay, so what about the prepositions of place? First of all, we've got different prepositions. In, as, on are the most used prepositions, but also we have to, along, and across. For example, in refers to an enclosed area. It refers that the object is inside something. For example, I put all your Legos in that big box of yours. I put all the Legos in that box. In that box is within that box. Is the Legos are inside the box. At a point, a reference in space, for example, the coffee shop is at the corner. Really, what we're doing here is that we're pointing with the language towards a very specific location in the map. On expresses a surface that it's within. Oh, sorry, it's on a surface. He's on his way to his job. On his way refers to that he's walking through the pavement to get to his job. So really, is there's an idea of surface. Now, to indicates more of a final destination, of a terminus. The train arrives to Glasgow in 20 minutes. To Glasgow, so that would be that we're heading towards Glasgow, and Glasgow would be the final stop of the train. Along, rather than meaning destination in itself, along refers more to a progression towards a destination. For example, it means a sort of a movement. He walks along the meadow. Along is that he's walking on the surface along through these places. So it indicates a place, but it indicates a place that goes through, or is a progression in it. And finally, we've got across. She went across the city to buy the dress. Across, again, means that he's crossing the city. So it implies a sort of a movement across over the map, but it means also a sort of a destination. What about through, out of, inside, outside, within, or above or below? Well, through is kind of the same thing as across. It refers to a place, and it means a movement. It means more or less like along. For example, the teacher showed them through the window. through the window. If along is referring to more, we couldn't say the teacher saw them along the window. Along refers that is in company of, whereas through is more of you're crossing something. You're crossing that the yes, the meaning you're crossing. In this case, the eyesight of the teacher is crossing the window. Now we have out of, it refers to something outside of an enclosed area. There's something, for example, we have a land which is limited by some barriers, and so we want to mean that it's out of these barriers, out of this land. So he's now out of the office, out of. The office is enclosed and he's out of this office. Inside, outside, that means the same thing as in or out, although it's just an emphasis more of saying where you are. Irene was out of the country when COVID started to spread, outside the country. Within refers is the same thing as saying in something. All the necessary documents are in the envelope, are within the envelope. All right, meaning within is dentro de, meaning more emphasizing the aspect of is something inside an enclosed thing, and above and below are kind of similar to up or under, but above means that it's a sort of a movement towards a movement that goes through something in the upper part of something, whereas below it goes through the lower part of the thing that we're describing. So higher and lower level. We're describing here higher or low level. The ball passed above the crossbar. Between, along, sorry, between, among, amid, near, nearby. Between means that you are in between two things, so it is in the middle of two objects. Among refers more that are between more than two objects. So between is more restricted to two things, but among probably more things in the map. My parents are among the guests, so there are a lot of people in the hotel, and my parents are there. Well, I don't know where they are, but they are in the hotel. Amid probably more same thing as among, but used more in a more formal context. Near, close to, or by, meaning the distance between two objects is minor. For example, I'm near, I'm on, or my house is near the police station. Near, it means that there's very little distance between the police station and my house. And nearby, also not used with a direct object, usually at the end of the verb. My house is nearby. What about the next ones? We've got over, under, underneath, beneath, behind, opposite, in front of, besides, and next to. Over and under is, again, more or less in the same thing as, in the same idea that we expressed the above and below, and a higher or lower point, close to, touching, underneath and beneath. You could also, you could include this famous song of Shakira, underneath your hips, no? So it's a kind of more formal aspect. Behind it refers more to your back, behind something. Very important not to students have a lot of problems to identify what is in front of and what is behind. Usually in front of depends on where you place yourself in the map. Opposite to gives the idea of facing. Again, this is some of the problems that the students usually have with this: in front of, behind, opposite to. Usually opposite is the meaning that is in front of you, is you're facing the object. His garden is opposite mine, so it's in front of mine. In front of is when you're facing something, so again it's a synonym. And besides or next to is more or less the same thing as what when you express nearby or near something. Besides is more kind of more poetic. My house is beside the sea. Well, what about the overlapping in prepositions of place? We have these as, in, at, or to, or from and to, which kind of in some particular aspects they offer certain overlapping. For example, I work in a school or I work at a school. Now, both things means more or less the same thing, but they have a nuance. If I say I work in a school, means that you're inside the building, so that you could be a teacher, you could be the headmaster, or you could not just be the cleaning man or the cleaning lady. So really, it does not refer more. It just only refers to place. Whereas if we say I work at a school, that means that you're working your workplace is a school, and consequently you're implying that you're a teacher. So I work for the school. And or to, for example, look at or look to. Look at is more referring to point with your language or point with your speech to a very specific item. So look at that lady, at that lady, or look at the lady. That you're pointing directly with your speech towards the lady in red, for example. Where look to, it's more used for random things. For example, as a teacher, I would advise my students look to find or look to these things, or look to these flowers, or look to those flowers. So more randomly, not very specific. And from and to, for example, we have seen this in used for location. I live in Palencia, and from and to refers more to this progression of the journey. I work from Palencia to Valladolid. How can we express other way? How can we express place in other ways? Well, we can express place through the adverbs here and there. So here we would mean by the context that we are placing, we're pointing at something that is near us, or there we are implying that is kind of far from where we are. Indefinite pronouns such as somewhere, anywhere, everywhere, or nowhere also imply a place, although very indefinite. We don't know where exactly do we have to place this item that we're saying or we're referring to. We also use the verbs, for example, static verbs or dynamic verbs. Static verbs would indicate position, whereas dynamic verbs would indicate a destination. I run towards the meadows, or I see, or I am in the meadows, or I am at the meadows, indicates more precision. Also, we can use nouns in order to indicate locations. Continent, countries, cities, villages, all of them allow us to express very specific point in the map. And relative clauses with a where. Valladolid is where I live. Where would be, it functions here as a locative. Now, how can we express direction? Well, direction is also expressed by prepositions: up, down, up and down. Up means that you go high from low to a high level, and down that you go from a down level to a high level to a low level. He climbed up the mountain, he climbed down the mountain. Up and down means repetition. That he went up and down the stairs, like saying he wanted to become fit, so he went up and down the stairs. So meaning that it's a repetitive action. Across, again, the across I have placed it as a place, and we could, and everything depends on how we use the verb. My father works across the avenue from me. Works across works means sorry. If we want to here would be wrong. Work across is more of a place. Esto es. Esto está mal. Aquí sería. My father walks across the avenue towards me, for example. En este caso, my father walks across the avenue towards me. Aquí sí hay un movimiento. O sea, perdón, the idea of that you're crossing through. Whereas if you say my father walks across the street, my father walks across the street. Across the street is a place. It's not a direction. It's just a place. The 5. The through would be from one point to the next. The path goes through the woods. Now here it's correct. There's a direction. It directs that you go from one place to another, so it goes through the woods. Along, the swans swim along the riverbank. That is, the river it's very long, and the swans go all the way through. Around, it means a circular way. The cars have to go around the circuit 40 times. Round and round means repetition. Cars were racing round and round the circuit. Towards means a movement. I walk towards the window screen. And the past also means on the farther side off. For example, I drove my car past the hills of Leon. Now, other ways of expressing direction could also be with the direct verbs. For example, the footballer ran across the field. Run across the field. Run also means a direction. Or the children are now running. Now, the meaning of run, swim, or send or drive imply that you're moving. And so if you combine those verbs of movement with a preposition that implies a destination, and what you get is you express definitely a destination at the end. Static verbs are motionless, so it's more difficult to express direction. But again, we can express them with the preposition. I met different teachers across Britain. When I was traveling across Britain, I met a lot of teachers, and I meaning that you have different during your direction or your destination around Britain, you are meeting people around Britain. Adverbs can also be used to express direction, such as backwards, downwards, or left or right, sideways. Those are also ways of expressing a direction. Finally, how can we express distance? Well, usually distance is expressed by measure, kilometers, inches, or miles, by comparing high as that building, tan alto como. Or we can use also preposition from. Madrid is 100 miles from Segovia, or from and to. It takes an hour and a half from Valladolid to Madrid, implying also these destinations. Between these two, there's a distance, and so you're measuring that distance. The use of adverbial at the end of the clause, for example, Valladolid is 200 miles away from Madrid. Away, meaning then there's a distance between Madrid and Valladolid, or far, also in the same thing. And also we could use the pronouns here and there to mark the distance from a very specific point in the map. This and that also allow us to express this more near, that would be a bit distant. And these and those, again, for plural and singular, for the plural, implying these near to your place in the map, and those far from your map. So all of these, what we have seen throughout this theme is how to express place and time through the prepositional phrase, through the verbs, and certainly through some adjectives. Now, although expressing distance is an easy thing, students have no problems understanding it. So still, it's important to work with them, and it's important also to work with them with the 4 and 2, because they still have they commit some mistakes, and they use indistinctively the 4 and the 2 in order to express not only distance but also place in the map. And so this is the end of this theme. Any questions so far? ¿No? Vale. Pues si no hay preguntas, voy a cerrar este PowerPoint, ¿vale? Y voy a abrir el siguiente y ya acabaríamos con la clase de hoy.
A ver, un momento que me llaman, un momentín, ¿eh? Vale, ya estoy aquí de nuevo. Perdonad que es que me han llamado y es que estaba pendiente de una llamada y... Bueno, vamos a ver. Continuamos con el tema 18, Location in Time, Temporal Relations, Frequency. So, what are we basically going to be looking at this thing? First of all, we're going to be looking at the temporal relationships that we can establish with the verbs, with the adjectives, with the verbs, with the prepositions, conjunctions, etc. There are frequency relations, and we will look at the conclusions. So first of all, what are the temporal relations that we can build up in English? Well, they are, first of all, these temporal relations are the most frequent blocks we find in English. Usually these temporal relations are made with the verbs, and with the verbs we can express in time. What we saw, the difference between time and tense, times referring to the line, to this kind of yes, the line that goes through a sort of linear that goes along the time, and we place different events throughout that line. Whereas the tense, it's the one that marks when the action happened. And here in English, there is only two tenses, the present and the past. The rest is modals. Now, temporal relations are also another way of exemplifying a sort of a logic relation or an orderly relation between different verbs. And so a very clear meaning.
Hola Paula, buenos días. Bueno, pues nada, no te preocupes.
Per,
Que bueno, así lo que
Per,
te quería decir más o menos, que
Fernando,
bueno, pues que ya sabes que la programación está que te cagas, que me gusta muchísimo, que solo me preocupa que metas en el anexo 2 la Future Classroom, que está
un
genial,
momento.
en plan grande, pero sí que me gustaría que apareciera, aunque fuera más chiquitín, más chiquitín, más chiquitín, en la parte de arriba de la metodología, en
Ok, bueno, seguimos, que ya me queda poco, ya me callo. Ya me callo yo en breve. So, when we use these linear order, or when we use these linear time where we place the different events, what we use as to imply this logic or this order within this linear time is the tenses, and so we are the verbs are the ones who give us different moments in which allow us to give us information that is logically ordered, or at least establishes a sort of logical meaning in this timeline. Now, how can we express temporal relations? We express them through adjectives. We can express them through adverbs, prepositional phrases, and of course by verbs. Now, usually these temporal relations, the temporal relations that we make or that we establish, is answer the questions of when or how long or how often. Now, what about the verbs? Well, we saw this in chapter 19 and chapter 10 about the verbs and the differences between the time and the tense. Now, here with the verbs, we're going to speak about the tense. English only has two tenses, the present tense and the past tense. The rest is only modality. Whereas the present tense, allow us to express actions in the present situation, and we can express time in the present simple, present continued, or the present perfect. Now, what about the present simple? The present simple is used for general facts or habits, whereas the present continuous describes an action or a moment of a speech. The present perfect refers to an action that has happened in the past and continues in the present. The past tense, on the contrary, talks about time and describes actions that do not have finished. Now, we've got the past simple, which is used to speak about former happenings. We use the past continuous to describe acts that took place over a period of time. And also we have the past perfect that is used to mark which action has happened within the past. So establish a kind of a logical order. The first action
is located would be used the past perfect, and the second action would be used. We would be using the past simple tense. Now, what about the adjectives? Well, adjectives are words that describe the noun, but also they allow us to give a certain quality of time. For example, if we look at words such as contemporary or concurrent or coinciding, these words express a value of time, and we can use them as to identify or classify a sort of a noun, or yes, a noun. For example, authors, contemporary authors, or contemporary literature. Now, also we find the time preceding, for example, the earlier or the former or the preliminary, are also words that allow us to express a preceding time, or time following. For example, the subsequent or the ahead or the following are also verbs. Adjectives that allow us to express a certain relationship. Other adjectives not having a reference point, for example, the time saving or timeless or time bound. For example, time saving that avoids waiting time. These are expressions that we use in order to express a certain temporal relation to. Timeless, which is not affected by time, or time bound, which is that it means that you are dependent on time. What about the adverbials? Well, usually adverbials are words that go through with the verb, and we give us more information about the verb. We use the adverbial of time to answer the questions of when. For example, if we looked at this question, Quirk, the linguist Quirk, says that we can establish three different references: a simple time point, at present, in the meantime, or time preceding, for example, before, formerly, previously, or the time following, for example, immediately, or later, or lately. These are the same things as what we work with the adjectives. For example, when we talk about ago refers to past time, and usually it's established with a time reference. I got this package some months ago. Ago refers to hace unos meses. Also, we use the adverbials in order to express frequency, and these are very used with the present simple, the frequency adverbs. Now, when we talk about this frequency, we go from the adverb that expresses that we do it every time as a routine, and the adverbs that express that we don't do it, never, for example. Now, and then finally, for how long does it happen, we use the all day as this adverbial group, expressing also temporal relation, or also the from and the to, that not only allows to express distance, but also time bound. What about the adverbs of already, yet, and still? Already means that the action has already happened, and we have already done it. For example, I have already seen the film. I have already watched the film. Sorry. Now, when do we place the already? Well, we place it in a mid sentence between the subject and the verb. I have already eaten. Sorry, the verb, the primary auxiliary verb. We could also place it at the end, showing some emphasis. Have you bought the present already? Or we can use it at the front, expressing a certain formal context. Already 200 people have recovered. About yet is something that has not finished, that is an action that it has been started but hasn't finished. For example, and it has a negative connotation, as in a way of making a sort of a critique. For example, we have, if we want to express a positive meaning, would be there's plenty of time yet. Todavía hay. So, and you express it with a positive verb. Whereas if we want to express a negative or even doubts, we will use the negative, the verb in the negative sentence, and like the following examples: he hasn't arrived yet, or hasn't he arrived yet. These ways are we are expressing a negative connotations. Also, we use the yet as to express a superlative idea. The best is yet to come, as saying that, well, we have done quite a lot of effort, but we need to finally there's still room to have a bit of success. And also, yet expresses a conjunction as however. Like in this case, by using the however, we lose the idea of time. Still emphasize something, emphasize a continuing action. I'm still in the work of my house. For example, in mid position, I still have to do my chores, mis tareas de casa. At the end, very informal. I can't find my bag still, or if we front it, but then it loses any connotation of time and would be of however. Now, what about the temporal relationships that we established? For example, as, in, or, over, or for. In usually is for precise time. We use it in times. For example, sorry, at is for very precise time. Just like when we use it in places, but to point at very specific aspects. For example, at 8 p.m. or at midnight. Or if we look at very specific times such as holidays, at Christmas, at Easter. In would be for long periods, centuries or seasons, or even months or moments in the day, in the morning, in the afternoon. Remember, at night. On is used for dates, usually associated with days, or with days of the moment, on Friday night, or with very special dates, on the 7th of December, my birthday, for example. Over refers to a period of time that implies a continuity in time over 4 centuries, so during 4 centuries, and 4 also implies a certain aspect of duration. I'm going for a year, and a year would be also a time of a kind of a time duration. Careful when during, because during does not mean the duration, exact duration of the moment, but and is followed by a noun or a pronoun. Usually, the students have a lot of problems with that. Now, when we place a moment or event in a time, we have also conjunctions such as when or as soon as, implying time relation. When usually is used to combine the past simple and the past continuous, while also use it to combine these two aspects. As, after, and before to express actions that are done or expressed in a speech, and so allow us to place and to order the events. Until refers to an action that is done in a particular moment, or while to express a simultaneous action. Usually while is expressed with the past continuous. For example, I was working while I was listening to the radio, both, okay, describing an action. And also, since refers back to date. For example, I got this book since December 2006. Also, time conjunctions can be followed by ing or ed forms before going home, right? Or we can will cannot be used with time conjunctions. Okay, when the couple visit the beach in Faro, they will sense something exceptional. In this case, when is used in the first sentence, visits, not with will. So when the couple visit, that means that you're already saying something in the future, or there's a nuance of expressing something in the future. Finally, we find the frequency, and there are 2 kinds of frequency. The definite frequency, that means that the exact moment, or the exact frequency that we want to express, 2 times a day, once a day, hourly or daily. That would be frequently, that it defines how frequent is the action you're doing. Or indefinite frequency, that would be using the adverbs of frequency, always, never, where we don't express actually when are we producing or making these sentences. So we end with this conclusion, and with regard to indication, this theme is particularly important because when we ask students to make the essays, most of the time, most of the preposition, most of the phrases or the time phrases that they include, or the complement time that they use, has to do with this theme. We ask them to write about the hobbies, the times, the holidays, and so they have to use a lot of the time expressions. So paying attention and dedicating classes to these sort of devices that allow the students to express time and order the event in a logical sequence, it's very important. And this is the end of today. This is the webgraphy. Any questions regarding this thing? Regarding this topic.
Y hablo yo si eso, vamos, si queréis. En
Bueno,
fin.
pues nada, ya me callo.
Pues nada, chicos. Chapamos el chiringo y volvemos a entrar, ¿vale? Si no hay
Vale,
ninguna
Fer.
cosita por ahí. Vale, Nacho. Gracias.
Vale. Chao, chao.
Clarito, hasta luego. Venga, cerramos y volvemos a abrir, ¿vale? Venga, vamos para allá.